All right, and welcome to Hat-Trick Sports Talk. It's just me for today. I'm joined by my good friend Paul. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. This is an emergency podcast in the biggest of terms because it's just me and Paul here, and of course David was joining us earlier, your brother, for our fantasy draft, our lottery. So good to have the
hmm
other commissioner on the podcast.
Good to be on. Thanks for having me.
Um, we wanted to go through the James Harden trade first before we get to sort of the inner workings of the trade, and we'll talk about some of the fantasy implications for category leagues and things like that. What was your
Sure.
reaction to both James Harden's comments yesterday, talking about how this team isn't really built for a championship, and then John Wall kind of talking
hmm
about the chemistry issues between him and Harden and the rest of the team? What were your overall thoughts of those comments after the Lakers game last night?
So it was interesting. I mean, it wasn't entirely unexpected. Everyone's known that Harden's been, not happy with the situation, disgruntled. So it wasn't unexpected. I was surprised to see him, you know, say it like that. That was surprising. Like he was very blunt with it. Usually players a little less blunt, but I feel like he was getting to that point where he was really just so unhappy with the situation that he just wanted out so badly. So he just kind of said whatever he wanted to say, and it kind of just snowballed from there. So it was a little surprising, but expected at the same time, if that makes sense. So a little bit of both. I think it was surprising the degree, like how scathing he was, but the fact that he said something wasn't that surprising to me.
Right. It took him a little while, I felt, because like in the summer when the rumors came out and all that stuff, he was very kind of reserved about it. And then it sort of, I kind of still felt it came out of nowhere for me because I was just like, whoa, okay. And then, right,
Yeah,
as you said, it
maybe.
snowballed in some ways. But um, do you feel like the John Wall James Harden relationship couldn't have built? Because I thought there was potential there after the first couple of weeks.
I thought there was potential in terms of their fit, but I just don't think. I just think James Harden was just so done with the situation that he didn't even want to entertain the possibility. So he most likely, yeah. I mean, it probably could have been a decent fit. It probably could have worked out a little bit, but I think James Harden just didn't. He wasn't even interested in exploring it. If he had been, I think it could have worked out better. But just his reluctance to do it, and his whole just him being done with the whole situation just caused him to like not even entertain the idea really.
Right. I felt that they worked well, and then of course Christian Wood there as well. I thought
hmm
there was potential for them to do something even in the West where it wasn't even like
Potentially,
where
but
it was where I mean the West is deep, but still I thought there was potential for them to do something
yeah,
there.
yeah. I mean, it's tough in the West this year, but I like since it's even deeper than it was last year. But yeah, I could see that making an argument they could have built something. I don't know, but I
Uh,
mean, it is what it is now.
so here's the deal. So James Harden goes to the Nets. They also get a 2022 second round pick from the Cavs. The Rockets get Oladipo, Exum, and Karutz. Picks
hmm
the Rockets. So three unprotected first round picks and plus pick swaps in 21, 23, 25, and 27. Also
hmm
Cleveland's 2022 first via the Bucks. And the Pacers get Levert 2023 second, and then the Cavs get Jared Allen and Torian Prince. What was your immediate reaction to this deal?
So there's a lot to unpack. Like we talked about, the headliner is obviously Harden to the Nets. That's obviously the headline of the whole thing. We can just start with that. I mean, it's interesting. It's gonna be interesting to see how he fits in Brooklyn. I've always since the rumors started about all of this of how Harden wants to go to Brooklyn, I've been curious about how the fit would be and how it would look with a lineup of Kyrie Irving, James Harden, and Kevin Durant, right? Those are three like ball dominant guys, all need the ball in their hands, and it's going to be an interesting fit how they make it work. So obviously that's the headline,
Do
but
you
if they
feel
can't,
like that? Do you feel like it's a complicated fit? Is that why you're a little hesitant?
a little bit, yeah, a little bit. I do think it's complicated because I feel like especially Kyrie and James Harden almost play a similar kind of style. Like they're both guys who, they don't run a lot of pick and roll. They're mostly like isolation, dribble guys who create their own offense, right? So they're gonna, uh, yeah, they're gonna drive in, they're gonna shoot threes, they're gonna create their own offense with the ball in their hands. They don't rely on anyone else to create their offense for them, right? Whereas Kevin Durant's the same way, but he's not quite as ball dominant. He doesn't need the ball in his hands at all times necessarily. Like I feel like Kyrie and James Harden do. So when you have three players who are that ball dominant, Kevin Durant to a lesser degree, but still ball dominant, when you have three players like that and there's only one ball, I feel like it's a complicated fit, especially between Irving and Harden. I think that's a complicated fit.
How do you think Nash is going to handle some of that ball dominance? Do you think he's going to have a difficult challenge on his hands?
Yeah, I do. I think him trying to figure out kind of for first, besides just kind of trying to spread the ball, you have to figure out just the egos. So that's just one thing right there. It's just the egos, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we all know Kyrie is how he is. We all know how he's kind of his own special kind of guy, and he thinks his own way, and he truly believes he's like that guy. Like you saw the comments he made with LeBron, how he said that, like, for the first time in my career, I have that someone else who can make like that shot. Talking about Kevin Durant, meaning he didn't think LeBron was that guy. So obviously he sees himself highly. He thought he was the guy in Cleveland when he had played with LeBron. He's obviously going to think that here too. You have Kevin Durant, who has on the record said that he believes he's the best player in the world. He said that he believes he's better than LeBron James, and that was his reason for going to the Warriors, that he wanted to prove to everyone that he was better and he could win a championship. And then finally, you have James Harden, who everyone knows is, people call him selfish. I don't think he's entirely a selfish player, but I mean, when you're averaging 35 points a game, you have to be selfish to some degree. So, just that kind of ego balance with all those guys is going to be interesting.
Yeah, and then for the Rocket side, Oladipo, or excuse me, for the Rocket side, they pick up Oladipo. For me, this is kind of the weird part of this. For me, it felt more like so there's an intricate balance, in daily life and in NBA trades in particular, of quality over quantity, right? A lot of these superstar trades are about quantity, so quantity of picks, the players that you receive. And that's where I had a problem with this, because the Rockets, clearly Shams talked about this on NBA TV, that he was like, oh, Ben Simmons was in trade talks for the Rockets for James Harden. And I was like, okay, in that case, you're taking quantity over quantity over quality, because you're just taking basically the picks and Oladipo, which isn't necessarily going to help you get over the hump. And you can make an argument that Ben Simmons might even be a better fit for the Rockets, especially in the West. So that's where I was like a little bit confused. Like, do the picks really matter that much when the Rockets at the beginning of the year felt they still had a title window, even if it was slim?
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but I think for them, they were content to bet a little more on the future. So, going with the draft picks, uh, getting Oladipo. So, I mean, the draft picks are the big haul here. That's really what they wanted. Oladipo's, that's a little bit of a return, but Oladipo's not the same player he was, especially with the injuries. He's still a solid player, but not how he was,
No,
let's say, 2 years
not.
ago.
Absolutely not.
So this isn't a trade where I think they're looking to win immediately. This is a trade where, this is kind of, maybe not a tank kind of situation, but it's definitely going to be. It's not a win now situation now. Obviously, it's not anymore.
Mm-hmm. How do Oladipo, John Wall, and Christian Wood mesh? Is it better for you? Could they make the playoffs?
I think it's interesting. I think it could make. It depends. It could make the playoffs. It's like we said, it's tough in the West, but they could make a push. I mean, it's an interesting lineup. It's a starting lineup of John Wall, Victor Oladipo, Christian Wood. You're starting PJ Tucker at the 4, and then at the
He
3.
might get traded too. Tucker might go
true.
too.
Yeah. If they want to go full rebuild, they could do that. I don't even know who they're starting at the 3. Oh, Daniel House. They're starting at the 3 currently.
Yes.
It's an interesting starting lineup. I don't know. I do actually think you said that you thought Ben Simmons was a better fit. I don't know if I agree with that. I think Oladipo is somewhat of a better fit, but he's not as good of a player. He's a better fit, but not as good of a player for them.
What makes you say that?
I just don't like the fit of Ben Simmons and John Wall at all. Like, I think it's a terrible fit. You have two neither one of them is a shooter. They're both solid defenders, but pretty much you just be relying on, you would have no shooters on your team at that point. You have a starting lineup with your best shooter being PJ Tucker. Like, it's
a
not,
huge transition from what they did the past few years. And
exactly, it's a total 180 from last season, where their whole play style was Russell Westbrook and Harden, and we're gonna drive and kick. That's all it is. We're gonna spread the floor, and they're gonna drive and kick, and that's pretty much it. where you're going to shoot layups or threes. This is a complete different style with if they were to go with John Wall and Ben Simmons. I just don't see John Wall and Ben Simmons working just because they're both two non-shooting guards. With Christian Wood, it was obviously a talented center, but he's not like he's an amazing three-point shooter. You just would have no spacing on the court. It would just be kind of log jammed. I feel like with Ben Simmons, similar to what happened in Philly last year. If you really think about it, they didn't have any shooters. It was just a log jam inside. So I think it'd be something like that.
For Philly
I think
as
Oladipo.
well. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was gonna say I think Oladipo is just reiterating what I said before is a slightly better fit for them.
Going to the Sixers as well, I actually like that they didn't pull this off because there was Tyrese Maxey, who's been really good for him this year, or at least for the past couple of weeks with all the COVID issues. But like, I felt like how they started the season and how Doc Rivers has really sort of changed what they're doing and made Simmons and Embiid work so well. We talked about it on the show a couple of weeks ago. What is your perspective on Doc Rivers and like how that Simmons and Embiid styles work so well, where I personally felt that they didn't really need to make a James Harden deal?
I agree that I didn't think they need to make a James Harden deal either. I could have made the argument actually that James Harden would have hurt them. That I think they should have stayed with what they have now and try to win like this. I think they would have become. I don't think it would have worked out very well if they had traded for Harden. Just because, sure, in theory, it sounds good. You know, you trade Ben Simmons and then you still keep Joel Embiid, and you have arguably the best center in the game in Joel Embiid, and you have arguably the best pure perimeter player in the game in James Harden. Right? On paper, it sounds great, but I don't think it would have worked out as well as people think. I think the offense would have been a big mess. Like, it would utter confusion with Embiid and Harden. It would have been, I think they would have been at each other's throats. I don't think it would have worked. And I think you take a massive hit in defense. For whatever Ben Simmons lacks on the offensive end, he is an elite defender. So I think that really helps him. I think them building a team around size and defense is what Philly needs, and I think this is definitely better for them right now.
For Philly, what has impressed you about what Doc Rivers has done to make this Simmons and Embiid thing work as well as it has? What has it been for you that's kind of stood out?
Well, to be honest, I can't put my finger on one thing. It's hard for me to just pinpoint one thing, to be honest. I don't know if it's scheme. I don't think they're playing very differently. I think what it is he's just kind of given the players. It's kind of what we talk. It's that Doc Rivers effect. He's kind of just given the players that. He's kind of just uplifted the players a bit. I think just the whole situation of Bruce Brown just became so bad towards the end that I think Doc Rivers just given them new life. He's given Joel Embiid the confidence to be that guy. I think with Bruce Brown, there was always kind of Joel Embiid was obviously that guy, but I think with Bruce Brown didn't encourage him the same way Doc Rivers does. Doc Rivers encourages him. Doc Rivers, I think, has given Joel Embiid like the belief and the confidence to take it to that next level. And I think you've seen it this year in Joel Embiid's play. Joel Embiid, I think, is playing on a different level this year than he did last year.
Yeah. I think one thing for me is the pick and roll. And we talked about this on the show last week of like their pick and roll is like a lot better than it looked before because there was one play last week on that ESPN game, I believe, where it was like Embiid hit a three off a pick and roll. Like they're not going to do that. They're going to mostly roll, but it's impressive how they're able to do that so effectively. And they weren't able to do that last year. I think that thing specifically was so surprising.
Well, part of that is, again, back to kind of how their offense was last year. It was just a logjam of they were starting Al Horford and Joel Embiid.
Thank God they got rid of Al Horford.
Exactly. So that's what I mean. The offense there was no spacing. There was a complete logjam there. So there was no, and so you can't run pick and roll when you can't space the court. You can't run pick and roll. You just can't do it. There's not enough freedom of movement. Too many players are inside. It doesn't work. You need to be able you need to be able to space the floor and be able to work pick and roll with two players. And I think that's what they've been able to do a lot better this year because, and part of that is the roster and part of that is also Doc. but I do think there's both parts. So part of it is our, part of it is also the roster. Just when you think about the roster itself, think about, again, we just talked about Al Horford, right? Think about last year they were starting Al Horford, and then they were starting Josh Richardson. So it was Ben Simmons, Josh Richardson, Tobias Harris, Al
Harris.
Horford, and Joel Embiid
Yeah.
and Embiid, right? In that starting lineup, you have Embiid and Simmons. Who Simmons is a non-shooter. Embiid can shoot threes, but it's not his strength.
He doesn't do that often much at all. He's an inside guy too.
Exactly. Well, that's also one of his weaknesses. When Embiid starts to shoot too many threes, is when he starts to mess himself up.
He doesn't
When he
go
starts
inside.
settling, exactly. When he starts settling for jumpers, is when he starts to play poorly. So it is good for him to mix it up. So he does take some threes, and that's good because he does have the range. But it he's not much of a shooter, obviously, right? And then you have Al Horford, who also isn't much of a shooter. He can hit a couple threes here or there, but essentially you have no real 3-point threats. Besides, you had Josh Richardson and Tobias Harris, but neither one of them is what you would call a knockdown shooter. Tobias Harris is a good player who makes threes, and Josh Richardson is the same thing. But neither one of them is you would consider a pure shooter.
Mm-hmm. They
right?
sort of eliminated the threes this year too in some ways. Like they're just not really worried about it too much, and it's benefited them a lot.
That's true. That is true. But I do think like Danny Green has actually played surprisingly well for them. It's actually
This week he's been pretty good. Like it's been
exactly.
surprising.
Exactly. And so if Danny Green is hitting shots, he's hitting shots and he's a good player. Danny Green just gets a lot of hate because, the playoff thing and he wasn't
The
hitting
bubble
shots.
was bad.
Yeah, the bubble was bad. But if Danny Green's hitting shots, I mean, he's a quality player. I think Danny Green's reputation has taken a big hit because of the bubble, but Danny Green was never this bad. Like if Danny Green is a quality player, so if he's hitting shots for them, he's a quality piece for Philly.
It spreads the floor out more too. Again, it absolutely just spreads the floor.
Exactly. And it's working well with playing Tobias at the three. And they're also adding Steph Curry was big. Steph Curry obviously hasn't played the last week because of the whole COVID thing, but
I feel like Maxi's going to take him over. Do you feel like Maxi's going to take him over? Because Maxi's been so impressive lately.
I could see it. I think they may keep Steph Curry in the starting lineup just because when you have a player like Ben Simmons, who your point guard just shoots no threes at all, you do need some shooting on the court. You do need to space the floor a bit. So I think that's what Steph Curry will provide for them. Maxey is also, again, just another non-3-point shooter. I think bringing Maxey off the court to run off the bench to run the second unit would actually work a lot better for them.
Yeah,
I think it would benefit them to keep Steph Curry kind of just as like a secondary shooter scorer in the starting lineup.
Before we get to the rest of this trade, we're talking about the spacing piece for Philly. Spacing has been like so important in the last like 5 to 10 years in the NBA. This is something we talked about before as well. How do you think it's changed, or why do you think it's changed this way? Of course, with the 3-point shot being more important, but like compared to like 2010, 2011, when the Mavericks won the title to now, it's a much different thing. And we talked about it before when we did that rewatchables a year ago, but just like us as a group, but like why do you think that change is so important, and why is spacing the floor kind of the way to go nowadays?
Just because I feel like people always talk about the analytics, right? And when people kind of woke up to the fact that, hey, like the 3-point shot it's yeah, sure, it's a lot farther, but it's worth so much more. And if you can make it at an effective clip, you score so much more. And with the game being played at such a higher pace nowadays, the more shots you can take, the higher value those shots are, and the more you can hit of them, the better you're going to play. And I think that's just kind of what started happening is first the revolution started, and I give credit to this, and most people do give credit for this to Steph Curry.
Right.
Steph Curry's that guy who revolutionized this. When people saw Steph Curry in 2013 launching all these threes a game, and when that year, I don't remember if it was 2013, 2014, maybe even 2012. The first year he broke the record for
like 2014, I would say pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah,
like
2012 might be too early. Yeah, exactly. The year that really I think did it, the one that really blew it open was, I remember the previous 3-point record for like threes made in the season was something like right under 200. It was like
And that was Ray Allen,
297 or
correct?
something like that.
That was Ray Allen,
I
correct?
think it was Ray Allen. I think it was Ray Allen. It was yeah, I believe so. And it was something around like 297, 290 something, like right under 300, right? So it kind of been like, oh, no one had ever hit 300 threes in NBA season, right? No one had ever done it. And then Steph Curry went and he hit 400.
Yeah.
So that was I think was the turning point. Like not only did Steph Curry break the 303 mark, but he hit 400 threes. And I think at that point where everyone was like, wow, like this guy is shooting this many threes, being this effective, it kind of just everyone started shooting threes. It's spread to everyone, and not just in the NBA. It's spread to every corner of the earth. If you play any pickup basketball games, all people do now is shoot threes. All anyone wants to do now is shoot threes.
I'm a 3-and-D guy when I play, and I suck at it, but I just
Exactly.
am.
So everyone wants to shoot threes. Even the big men want to shoot threes now. 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, you didn't see big men shooting threes like this. Now, almost every big man in the league shoots threes. It's uncommon to have someone who doesn't shoot threes.
Stretch 4s and stretch 5s are common things now.
Exactly.
The rebounding is kind of like gone, even though there's a lot of guys that can rebound at a pretty effective clip. But
that also comes just from the pace of play. Yeah. If higher pace of play, it means more shots, it means more rebounds. So that piece isn't just that rebounding is not down because the pace of play is up. Pace of play being up leads itself to more of every stat, more points, more assists, more rebounds. It leads itself to everything. So that's why it's maybe there's a little less size, but it's not attributing to less rebounding.
Yeah. And then the Pacers get LeVert. LeVert has been ridiculous this year, as he was last year. I think unexpected to all of us, considering all the pieces in Brooklyn. But now he goes to the Pacers. Is he their number one option, at least in the front court, potentially?
That's interesting. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that one yet, because Brogdon has played amazing this year so far. Brogdon has actually been pretty incredible. Mm-hmm. He had a bad game today, but besides that, Brogdon has been really, really good. So I don't know. Like Brogdon has been so good. He still has to run the offense. I don't think Karras can take it over completely from Brogdon. You still have Sabonis, Sabonis is still an elite 2010 kind of guy.
He's so underrated.
Exactly.
He's ridiculously underrated.
Yeah. No one really pays attention to him. He's just kind of a guy who goes under the radar, but he'll get you 20 and 10 every night. So yeah. Like you still have Sabonis there. You have Miles Turner, who's not much of an offensive piece. He's just a defensive piece. Exactly. Blocks for days.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and that's about it. And then they're starting Justin Holiday, I believe, now currently.
Yes, they are.
Yeah,
it's a far position. And he's been rough.
Yeah. They would be starting TJ Warren, but obviously with the whole injury thing, TJ Warren's out. But
for a while.
Yeah. To back to your question of who's kind of the main offensive option there, I don't think too much changes, honestly, in that offense. I honestly think swapping Oladipo and Karras was almost like for like. I don't think it actually accomplished too much. I think even for fantasy value, I think it stays kind of relatively constant. I don't think Oladipo's value changes much, and I don't think LeVert's value changes very much either.
Yeah.
Maybe they both get slight bumps, maybe slightly, but
I don't think LeVert needs a bump. I think he's good where he's at, which is pretty consistent.
Honestly, if anything, LeVert could take a hit, and that's only because I think he was so incredible this year on the Nets because he was coming off the bench. They had him come off the bench, and he was running. He had the second unit to himself. Yeah. Right. So that's why he was that's why he's been so incredible. And he's been putting up these stats, is just the fact that he's been essentially playing by himself in the second unit has allowed him to put up these gaudy stat lines.
So you think it could slow down a little bit? Because I still feel like it could be pretty constant. Like he might take some of a point hit here and there, but I don't think it's gonna be that bad.
Yeah,
he's a versatile player to me. Even with all the
he is definitely a versatile player. I think maybe his point stays constant. I think actually his biggest hit maybe his assist numbers, because his assist numbers have actually been pretty good. But I think now with Brogdon running the show in Indiana, I think his numbers will take a hit.
I mean, do we really care about assists with him though? Do we really care? Like if you have him on your team?
No. Yeah.
Do you really
Not
care?
Necessarily, but I mean, if you look if you look at Karis LeVert's stats so far this year, he has been putting up a good amount of assists. So from that perspective, you want to talk about from a fantasy perspective, he does take a fantasy hit in
Yeah.
terms of his assist production.
But again, I don't think if you didn't draft him for assists.
Yeah, no, that's
Like
true. That's true.
you didn't
That's
really
fair.
do that. I
Yeah,
think
that's fair.
the weirdest fantasy and kind of real life implications, but let's talk about the real life implications for this. Let me make a proposal to Cleveland. Let me make a proposal. This looks stupid, but I'm gonna make it anyway.
Okay.
Colin Sexton
Okay.
at the 1, Garland at the 2, Larry Nance Jr. So I'll mix and match. I'm not sure exactly where.
They have an interesting lineup.
So
I don't even know
so
who, but yeah, go
here's
ahead.
my proposal my healthy proposal starting 5. Colin Sexton at the 1, Garland at the 2, Larry Nance at the 3.
Okay.
Then let's go Kevin Love at the 4 and Jared Allen at the 5. The biggest lineup in 2021. Cleveland Cavaliers. Is that a fair proposal?
I could see it. You want to bring Drummond off the bench?
Oh, actually, I forgot about. No, Drummond would be. Wait, dang. Yeah, that's right. No, actually, I would switch out Larry Nance. So I'd move. Excuse me. I would put Kevin Love at the 3,
Okay.
and then like do Allen and Drummond, and then have Nance come off the bench because Nance is probably better off the bench. So there we go. That would be my official lineup. Is that good?
I don't know what to say, to be honest. I feel it's pretty crazy because as we just talked about in today's NBA, that's all about shooting, all about spacing. It's all about chucking as many threes as you can. In today's NBA, that would definitely be a unique lineup. Definitely a unique lineup.
It's a lineup that causes for 20 wins. That's it. Maybe less.
Exactly. I just don't know. It would be interesting, but I don't know how it would work in today's league. I don't know who you would guard. Like that team would be terrible defensively. If you were to play small against them, they would not be able to guard anyone. Like Kevin Love and Jared Allen and Andre Drummond could kind of guard perimeter players because he's that talented of a defender. But Kevin Love and Jared Allen on the perimeter, I don't know, man.
Also, I don't know how plausible this is, but it could be plausible if we have another mega trade. Does this mean Kevin Love's on the trade block? Because I think it means he's on the block.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I think he was kind of on the block before.
He was on the block before, but his contract was so massive.
That's the issue. That's the big issue in trading him is just his contract. It's for his current production, for the player he is today, that contract's not worth it. It's kind of
it's not feasible. Like him and Blake Griffin.
Yeah, I was gonna say the exact same thing. I was like, it's very similar, just a Blake Griffin situation.
Yeah. Do they get traded for each other? Or something like, I mean, it would be messed up, but
there's no point for them to do that. But I mean, there's no point for him to do that. But I could see him being, I don't know about Blake, maybe, but I could see Kevin Love being a trade piece to maybe a contender at the deadline. I could see it. I don't know. I don't have someone off the top of my head, but
I don't think we have anybody because I don't know who can afford him. But my whole thing is Larry Nance has been so good. I mean, he'll probably be even better off the bench because it's kind of just him. If this is the lineup and Nance is off the bench, and he'd be much better. But I'd like to see him in the starting lineup, maybe even over Kevin Love. He's been that productive. So maybe this is more reason to trade Kevin Love in some respect.
Maybe I could see that. I definitely could see them trading him. It have to be for the right deal, because with that contract, I don't know where he would go. But I definitely think it's interesting. I definitely think it would be interesting to see somewhere he could go. I'm trying to think of a contender who kind of needs a Kevin Love kind of player.
But who's willing to trade a good chunk of cap room?
That's true.
Who's willing to do that?
Yeah. Like, I don't know, someone who has a big contract that they're willing to get rid of. I don't know. I'd have to look into it more, but
yeah, I don't know. Why Blake Griffin pops in my head is it feels like a John Wall Westbrook thing where that was like the only feasible option because of their contracts. But even then, it doesn't really make sense for both teams.
Yeah, it
virtually at all.
Exactly. This doesn't make sense for anyone. So I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of some kind of a team that, a contending team that
Phoenix.
maybe a contending that is lacking some size. Who
So
they need
can we do a Crowder deal here? Can we
maybe.
do like Crowder? I mean, you'll have to put in a lot more, but Crowder hasn't been that productive. I don't think
Hmm.
Cleveland would care to have him off the bench. This
Hmm.
opens up Cam Johnson a little bit.
Hmm.
I still like Phoenix as an option,
Yeah, that could be good. That could be interesting. Yeah, I
but
think.
Chris Paul's contract is a bit rough too, just to say that as well.
Yeah,
But
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I think I'd have to think about it, but I definitely think Kevin Love could be an interesting trade piece at the deadline for sure. Yeah.
how do you project this lineup looking like?
The Cavs lineup?
Yeah.
So definitely Garland and Sexton for
Yeah.
sure. And then at that point, after that, it's hard to figure out. I mean, they're definitely starting Drummond, so they're
Yeah. No.
definitely starting Drummond.
I
And
missed Drummond earlier. Definitely.
yeah, and I definitely think they're gonna bring Allen off the bench. I don't think they're gonna start Allen. I don't think you can start Allen and Drummond. I just don't think you can start them both at the same time. To be
Yeah.
honest, it's too. It's
It's
that's
way
just
too
too
much
much.
size.
It's way too much. It's similar back to the whole Philly thing from last year, but even worse because at least Al Horford and Joel Embiid could like shoot a little bit, but like Jared Allen and Andre Drummond can't at all. So you have two players who need to both score within 5 feet of the bucket.
And
Like
they need to be fives. They can't be fours in
exactly.
most cases.
I don't think you can start both of them at the same time. So I think Jared Allen has to come off the bench. Then I think assuming Kevin Love and Larry Nance are healthy, my feeling is that they are going to start Kevin Love and bring Larry Nance off the bench. And then I'm not entirely sure. Do you know who they've been starting at the three, at the small forward?
I have no clue. I'd have to look. I'm gonna look right now. I have no clue who they're starting at small forward.
Yeah,
right now.
I'm trying to think. I know they have Cedi Osman, but Osman's been coming off the bench. I know they were starting Isaac Okoro a bit, but I think that
Okoro isn't Okoro back? Wasn't he hurt for a bit?
he may have been.
I think it would be Okoro.
Yeah, I think
it would have to be Okoro.
Yeah, I could see. I think they were starting. They definitely started him a couple games. I just don't know if they were starting him regularly, but he definitely started some games. Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's pretty solid. I mean, he's a young player, high pick. Need to develop him.
I'm sorry for reacting so evilly here, but do you realize they have JaVale McGee as well?
They do have JaVale. I forgot about that.
God.
But they do have JaVale McGee as well.
They are so big.
They have so many bigs. They truly do.
Oh my God, this is too much.
JaVale McGee actually, so yesterday Drummond didn't play, and JaVale McGee actually played decently well. I don't know.
He was baller, yeah.
That's what JaVale McGee has some, like, I don't know if you saw this. He had this play yesterday where he like Euro stepped and had this reverse layup. I was like, oh my God, JaVale McGee, what are you doing?
Yeah, like this is too much. Like they're gonna have to trade somebody because this is actually too much. Like JaVale might get DMP CD'd.
Oh, for sure. I think now he for sure will. Yeah. Even now before the trade, he was getting, with Drummond healthy, he was getting like minutes in teens. I don't know, maybe like 14, 15 minutes a game, somewhere around there. So I mean, with this trade, I think LeVert definitely takes his minutes at plus more, as there's nothing left in the rotation for McGee. There's nothing left for him. Yeah.
Yeah. From a fantasy perspective, this Cavs lineup is almost like hell in a handbasket in some ways.
Yeah, it's interesting. You just don't know what to expect. I don't know.
I feel weirded out because I have both of them on the same team. I have both Drummond and Allen.
Yeah.
I have both of them. Now I'm disappointed because Allen was actually getting minutes and appeared to get some trust from Steve Nash.
Yeah, he was. I saw that as well. So he was definitely going in the right direction. He was trending in the right direction. I saw what he'd been doing. He'd been playing really well.
Yeah. So from a fantasy perspective, like I feel like Drummond's gonna be fine, and I mean obviously most people don't have both of them. So let's go from that perspective. If you have, let's say, just Drummond, or even probably worse, just Allen, how do you perceive the situation?
yeah, it is kind of a hard situation. So like you said, if you have Drummond, I think you're fine.
Yeah.
But I do think he takes at least a slight bit, a slight hit. I don't think his value stays where it is now. I do think he has to take a little bit of a hit. Maybe not a lot, but I do think he takes a little bit of a hit because, as I mentioned, definitely some of those minutes that were like JaVale McGee was only getting like 15 minutes a game. I think Jared Allen will definitely get more than 15 minutes a game.
I hope he gets 20. I think
Yeah.
best case scenario for him fantasy wise is he gets just 20.
hmm So, but even if you just give him 20 minutes a game, that's definitely cutting into Drummond's play
Drummond,
time.
for sure.
And so I think that has an effect on Drummond. It's somewhat similar to what happened last year when
Drummond got moved to Cleveland.
yeah, exactly, when he was traded from Detroit to Cleveland, and they had Tristan Thompson.
Yeah.
So they at before the trade, Tristan Thompson had been starting, and then the trade happened. Drummond became the starter, and Tristan Thompson was backing him up. But Tristan actually played pretty well last year, and so even once he was a backup, Tristan Thompson was actually getting a good amount of minutes last year, and he honestly was cutting into Drummond's minutes a bit, and it was Drummond didn't take a big hit, but it was a little bit frustrating. I had him last year in fantasy,
I
and
had him last year too. I was okay with him because I literally just got him for boards last year and he was
yeah,
pretty productive there.
yeah,
I didn't really care. Like, obviously, I wanted him to get like 20 and 10, but I
yeah,
was fine with the 20 and 10 baseline
yeah.
for the entire year.
Yeah, I mean, he took a hit. It was just a little bit frustrating. Like he'd have games where, I mean, I think his average actually was probably around like 16 and 16 or something like that.
Yeah.
That's kind of where he hovered around where he was like in Detroit. I think that went down to maybe like 12 and 14 in
Yeah.
Cleveland, something like
Yeah.
that, right? So it's a hit. It's not much of a hit, but
It's a
it's
hit
still a hit.
regardless.
Um, maybe yeah, I still think he's probably like somewhere around a 15 and 15 guy even now. But it's going to be an interesting situation to monitor for sure.
Yeah. If
um,
you have just Allen, are you in panic mode right now?
a little bit, yeah. I think I am. If I have Allen, I think I'm in a little bit of a panic mode. um,
Hmm.
I, I think maybe now you try to go into a sell high mode, but it's hard now because of the trade, because he's on Cleveland and everyone knows he's going to get less minutes and he's a backup. I think it's hard to trade him now. But I think you kind of may have to take that opportunity and try to sell him. Try to sell him on, maybe you can sell him on his previous production. If you look at what he's done to this point, it's amazing. So
Mhm.
maybe you can sell him just on what he's done to this point. But
Yeah.
I do think it's a little concerning if you have just Allen. If, like in your case, you have Drummond and Allen, I think that case you're a little bit safer. But
I think I'm okay because I literally just have them for boards. I do have Allen for blocks. I wonder how much of a hit he'll take there.
mm,
But if he comes off the bench, he can still get the 2 blocks a game that I would
yeah, he
like
still
him
can.
at.
And I mean, and Drummond's still a solid block guy. Drummond's amazing for stocks, for both stocks, steals and blocks. So
Yeah. So I'm not terribly concerned. It shouldn't go completely off
mhm,
haywire, but yeah, I mean, if you have just Allen, like I don't even. It depends what you need, but
yeah,
to lose that production, I mean, obviously boards are pretty easy to find on the waiver wire. Guys like
mhm,
Ennis Cantor are prime examples of that. But
yeah,
but like if you get him, if you have him I mean, if you have him for blocks, you might be okay. But again, like the numbers are going to go down. So if he's like your
yeah,
even if he's like your secondary guy, just having him is going to be pretty rough. And I think
yeah,
it's going to be almost impossible to sell him.
yeah,
Even in the worst of leagues, I think it's going to be extremely tough. If you want to get rid of him, you're going to get rid of him for a lot less value. You're not even going to be able to get a buy low guy unless you make a pretty expensive package.
that's true. But I think if you were going to do that, you have to do it now. I think the more games he plays in Cleveland, it the more the value is going to go down. So I think now is at the highest he's going to be until
Okay.
he starts to drop. Because right now, even though he's been traded, no one's seen him play in Cleveland yet, right?
Yeah.
There's still uncertainty. Like no one's actually seen it. No, he hasn't been on the court yet, so no one knows what it's going to look like yet.
Hmm.
So once he starts playing, though, I do think his stats are going to take a hit, and it's going to be harder and harder to trade him.
Who's the better option right now, Enos Cantor or Jared Allen in fantasy?
Oh, that's actually a very interesting question.
Because that's what I'm trying to think about. It's like, is bringing Cantor in is actually better?
I think Cantor could be better, but it remains to be seen. I don't think you can determine that now.
I don't think
Only
I don't
because
think it's he's
I think Cantor's had a great start to the season only because Nurkic has been so slow to get started.
yeah.
I think Nurkic has played really poorly, and I don't think he'll play this
Yeah.
has boosted Cantor's value for now.
Say that again. Sorry, my internet was like tripped out. What
Okay,
were you
that's
saying
no
again?
problem. Where was I? Do you remember
We
the
were
last
talking.
thing I said?
We're talking about like Cantor, like who's probably the better option. So just kind of rephrase what you said there. So like, do you basically? I guess my question is, do you feel like? Hang on, we have some small
Okay, looks like
connection. We have some small connection issues for some reason. All right, we're
okay.
back. We had some small connection issues. So we're talking about like the better option, Cantor or him. Like you're right. I think even with Nurkic, because he's not going to be this rocky the whole year.
Exactly.
So
So I think this is I think it's hard to determine who's going to be better right now, Allen or Cantor, just because it is uncertain what's going to happen in Cleveland with Allen. It's we really don't know. And then but I do think if here's what I'll say. If Cantor keeps up what he's doing now the rest of the year, I think Cantor is the better option if he keeps this up.
but it's not
But
likely.
exactly, that's the point I was going to get to. That I think Cantor's been so good to this point because Nurkic has been so slow.
Yeah, and he's not going to be this slow the whole year. You didn't draft him expecting him to be this slow, but he's just not going to be like that.
Yeah, and part of that's also if you look at Nurkic's minutes, he also just hasn't been getting the minutes. Nurkic, I think, is averaging something around 25 minutes a game. Like
Is that
he's
like coming out of injury kind of, or why is that the case?
I think so. I read a little bit about it. So I don't know the full situation, but I do know he had some foul trouble issues earlier in the season. So he was getting a lot of foul trouble. I don't know if that's he's just kind of working his way back into game shape or what it is. I'm not sure, but he was having a lot of problems with foul trouble. And then another piece of it was that just in the first, we've only played about 10 games this season so far. Just in these first 10 games, the Blazers have actually been a lot of blowouts. They've actually been involved in a lot of blowouts where they've either been blown out and been blown out both
Yeah,
ways. So, and that will always decrease the minutes of the starters. So,
yeah.
um, Dame and CJ have been fine because they're
Dame
just
had
those.
one bad game the first game of the year, but other than that,
Exactly, and then CJ's been incredible. CJ's been amazing. Like, oh my God, have you seen what CJ's
yeah,
been doing?
it's crazy. Yeah,
Um, so they've been fine, but I think Nurkic has been slow to start. I think he's just trying to work his way back. He was incredible in the bubble after everyone thought he was going to be slow there. Everyone thought he was going to be slow in the bubble since he hadn't played in
yeah.
a year and a
But
half.
it was
But
also like the energy was different there because Portland was trying to make
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly.
qualifier game or whatever. Is Allen going to be droppable at any point in the year? Do you think that? I think that's a bit too far.
Yes, I agree. It may be a bit too far, but I would not be surprised to see it. To be honest,
Yeah, no, me neither.
I don't know if it will be the case, but I don't think it would be surprising. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think.
I don't think his baseline will dip that much that he'll
Yeah,
be droppable.
yeah. I
But it
could see it.
but it could dip. I mean, it's gonna dip, but I don't. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know.
Mhm.
He could be. He could be. It's gonna be just interesting to see. I just don't know what's gonna happen with that kind of roster that Cleveland has and all those bigs that they have. I just don't know who gets the minutes, who gets the opportunities. It's gonna be interesting to see how that all shakes out. Just because
Mhm.
there's so much. I don't know what I would do for a roster like that. It's so
You
crazy of how many bigs they
I
have.
trade. I don't know what I'm. Yeah, it's gonna take him a while. I think.
I just don't even know.
Long-term future for Cleveland, is it good or is it bad? Because does this mean, okay, Drummond leaves next year and Allen's your guy, and then you have Larry Nance? Is this actually good for Cleveland's future? Not this year, but moving forward?
Robert, you're cutting off a bit. I don't know if you can hear me.
Oh, no, I can hear you just fine.
Okay. You were cutting off a
Um,
bit. What were you saying? Say that hear it out.
long-term future for Cleveland. Is this actually good if they can keep Allen, maybe lose Drummond?
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, I definitely think Drummond. I mean, Allen is a solid, talented young center. So I do think that this could be good for them, especially since I think Drummond's approaching 30. Uh, I love Drummond. He's a great player, but his game doesn't lend itself great to age. I think as he ages, I think Drummond will decline pretty rapidly. Once he loses that athleticism, he won't be able to rebound the same rate. He won't be able to play defense like he does. And those are his main calling cards. So I think long term this could play out pretty well for Cleveland. I think what Cleveland's doing is I think what they see is they think that they have their guards of the future. They kind of
Oh, they do.
see
Sexton and Garland have been ridiculous this year.
exactly. They kind of see Sexton and Garland kind of as their like we just talked about them as their Dame and CJ. That's
Yeah.
kind of what they see, right? They see maybe not as good. I mean, obviously not at this point, but even long term, maybe not as good. But that's kind of how they see them. And then I think what they're trying to figure out, they're just trying to figure out who do they want to complement them. So that's why they're trading for all these bigs. Like that's why they traded for Andre Drummond. They traded for Jared Allen now. They're just trying to see how can they best complement these two like star guards that they have.
And then for the Nets side, fantasy value for the Nets, they all take a dip pretty much. But is Harden a top 5 fantasy player still?
I don't believe top 5. Top 5 I think is too high. I think top 10 to top 15. I think he could be top 10 still. If Kyrie isn't playing, he's definitely top 10, could maybe even push top 5. With all three of them, top 10, he could even drop top 15.
With Kyrie, what are you doing with him right now? Are you trading him? Are you trading Harden? Oh, can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Are you with Kyrie?
Yeah,
What?
with Kyrie, like are you trading him on your fantasy team? Same with Harden. Are you looking at trade options for both of them with Kyrie's going on here? And I've advocated a trade from Harden from the opening bell of the season if you have him. I know you have
Yeah,
Kyrie in our league. Are
yeah,
you
I do.
looking at some options, I guess? Or would
Um,
you?
maybe. I think it's interesting. I'm torn to be honest. So I think I don't know what to believe about Kyrie. I don't know when he'll play.
I don't
I
know
don't
what's happening. He might retire.
yeah, Stephen A. Smith was saying that.
I feel like he should. I feel like he doesn't really know. That might be what's going to happen. Like if he retires and you got Harden, you're fine.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what to make of it, but it's so tearing because I think when Kyrie plays, he really is an incredible fantasy player.
Oh, he's ridiculous.
Yeah, but I think he just never plays. Like not even like before it was always injuries. Last year he was injured all year, but like then now he just doesn't want to play. So
Or whatever personal thing, COVID thing, whatever that is.
yeah. I mean, and it's just because he has so much going on. Kyrie's just such a unique guy. He just you don't know what he's thinking, and I think that's why he's so unpredictable. And obviously unpredictability isn't good for fantasy.
Or
Like
real life in this case.
yeah, or real life. So yeah, to answer your original question, I think you can look into trades, but for just be careful because I think that for these players right now, Kyrie and Harden, we're at a moment right now where there's a lot of panic around both of them, right?
Yeah.
Like with Kyrie, there's a lot of panic because of this whole he's not playing, he doesn't care about basketball, all this, right?
Mhm.
And then with Harden, the panic is, just the fact that what's this fit gonna look like? There's the whole out of shape thing, but I don't think that is too much of a thing. I think he was just out of shape just because he didn't want to play for Houston. He just
Yeah.
did everything he could to get out of Houston. He's like, I'm gonna be out of shape. I'm just not gonna do anything. I'm gonna give no effort, and I'm
Yeah.
hope they trade me. That was pretty
Uh,
much what they were.
Christian Wood's fantasy value, is this a plus for him?
Yeah, I think it's a plus for him. I think it's I think I already think he was. I mean, even his value of Harden was still incredible. He was
Yeah.
still
He was undervalued in drafts
yes,
majorly.
yes. But I think that was just a piece of I knew that Christian Wood could be this kind of guy. I picked him up last year when he did when he broke out last year
Yeah.
when Drummond got traded and he broke out on Detroit. I had him and he was like after that Drummond trade he was arguably like a second round value player. last year.
He's a
So
second round guy this year too.
yeah, exactly. I knew he could do this. I think he was just drafted so low just because no one had seen it. No one had seen him with Harden. Just didn't know how that would fit. Um, and especially on Houston, a team that last year completely like shunned bigs. Like
That's why it was a good fit in hindsight.
yeah. In hindsight, that's why it was a good fit. But I mean, again, like no one really knew what to expect of Christian Wood. So everyone knew he could break out like this and he could have this kind of season. But he was just going. He was going like average, like fifth round in oh no, sixth round kind of I think was in fantasy was his ADP somewhere
I
around
think it was
there.
like 50, 60.
Yeah, that's about like the turn of the fifth, sixth round
Yeah.
because the fifth round is the 40s and the sixth round is the 50s. So it's
Yeah.
around there, like around fifth round, fourth, fifth, sixth round value
Mm-hmm.
range where he was getting picked. But again, that was only I think just because of the uncertainty. There's always like that with players. There's always players people who could put up like first, second, third round value, but just because of the uncertainty around them, they're just always picked lower. That's always the case.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I do have one more question before this last question, but John Wall, last kind of fantasy player talking about John Wall. Are you worried about his value, or are you kind of set with him because his value is really weird? I think. For me.
Yeah, I think he is weird. I think John Wall could take a bump here because I think getting rid of Harden, yeah, he's gonna be replaced with Oladipo, but I think getting rid of Harden will open up John Wall a bit. I think just that team is gonna work a lot better now, just because I think they were just having major issues with Harden. Just you heard what Boogie said today, for example, like the
Oh yeah.
disrespect started way before. So I think they just didn't get along at all. So even from Boogie mentioned that. He mentioned that ever since training camp, there's been this disrespect, right?
Yeah.
So I think just getting rid of Hard will kind of like clear the air. Everyone will feel better, and then like even the fit of having Oladipo there with John Wall will be a little bit better of a fit. It'll help Christian Wood a little bit. He'll be a little bit more of the ball for Christian Wood too. So
Mm-hmm.
overall, I think it kind of more or less helps everyone in Houston.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe just yeah, even Oladipo could help him a bit as well too. I think even Oladipo takes a bit of a bump from his
Right. We talked
Indiana
about
value.
like he
Yeah.
could be very similar, could take a bit of a bump. Yeah.
So I think yeah, more or less it's kind of everyone in Brooklyn kind of takes a bit of a hit while everyone in Houston kind of takes a bit of a bump.
Yeah, and then like with Cleveland, we don't know what to think.
Yeah, Cleveland we don't really know, and then the last piece was Karras to
Which I
Indiana.
kind of like. I'm not too worried about that in terms of value.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Before you go, let's do fantasy biggest surprises and biggest disappointments. Who's on your surprise and disappointment list?
Okay, that's interesting. Let me kind of think about that. So
I have well, this is not even a surprise because it is a surprise for one specific category. My
okay.
guy Julius Randle, he's
Oh, okay.
actually getting like 7 assists a game. What
Yeah,
the heck? I was not expecting him to get point guard level assists, like
yeah,
Alfred
I know.
Payton level assists.
If that okay, that's a good one. That definitely surprised me as well. I've always liked Julius Randle, but I thought he was just like a 2010 guy who, like, that's what he did last year. He was just a solid 2010 guy.
That's why I liked him a
Not
lot last year.
not very many stocks, couple threes, but mostly just like an efficient 2010 guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this year he's totally expanded his game. Like he's shooting more threes now. He's passing more. So Julius Randle for sure. That one's been a bit of a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
Another one for me, we mentioned him is CJ. CJ for me has been I don't even know. CJ for me has been incredible. Like I was not expecting this out of CJ at all. Like not at all.
Is it
Like
like
I
the points and threes production for him, or like what specifically about his production?
he's actually putting out full stat lines now. So CJ's always been really good for points and threes, like you said. He's always been a guy who averaged 22, 23 points a game, good threes, but he's never been kind of like that peripherals guy. He's always, if you look at his previous stats, he's never averaged very many rebounds. He's not a very good passer, not very many stocks. But this year, if you look at his stats, he's he's upped his of rebounds and assists. I think he's getting a little bit more stocks as well. He's scoring at an elite clip. I don't think he's averaging more than Dame, but it's pretty
Yeah,
close.
I mean, his
So,
stocks, to be clear, is steals and blocks.
oh yeah, stocks. There you go. Just
We
combining the
call, we
word
call
steals,
we call it
blocks,
stocks,
stocks. Yep.
and it's really important for fantasy. Another surprise for me got to be Miles Turner. The blocks
Yeah.
rate for him.
Yep. Yep.
I mean, I would have drafted him so much higher, knowing
Mm-hmm.
that like he's getting 8 and then 4 and then 6 and then
And
4 and
and
then
then
6.
5 and
It's
then
like wait, what?
yeah, yeah. Did you see his stat line last night?
He got like 8 blocks last night. It was insane.
8 blocks was a couple games ago, but last night Miles Turner had I think 22 and 12 with 2 steals and 5 blocks.
God, my God. He's single-handedly carrying you in the blocks category. There's
Yeah,
like no one in the NBA right now or in fantasy that does that block rate. Nobody.
I know. It's actually been pretty crazy, his block rate this year. So that's
Mhm.
definitely been a surprise. I mean, everyone knew Miles Turner was a blocks guy. He always has been. But just the rate of his blocks this year, yeah, that has been surprising. I
Mhm.
agree.
Who else? Maybe from like your team or some a player that surprised you.
I don't think this is a surprise, but I want to give a shout out. I saw this one coming, but I just want to give a shout out to my guy, Zach LaVine.
Yeah, geez. I mean,
Uh,
dude, he's like their only offensive guy though, to be
I mean,
fair.
there's Kobe White now too,
I
but
guess.
I,
More of
I,
an
I
assist guy for me. That's kind of where I was thinking about drafting him, is more of
yeah,
like a base assist guy.
maybe, but I mean, I saw this coming with Zach. I thought under Billy Donovan that offense was gonna work so much better. I thought they were so stagnant last year under Jim Boylan. I would
Oh
watch
my
some of that
God, it was horrible.
exactly, and I
It
think
was horrible. Oh
and
my
I
God.
thought under not under Billy Donovan, they were gonna play much quicker, much faster. They were gonna, and it's exactly what's happened. And I really thought it was gonna be really good for Zach's fantasy value.
Mhm.
So I mean, I kind of saw this coming, but I did not expect him to blow up like this. Like Zach has actually blown up to like even more than I expected him to be
Mhm.
honest.
Mhm.
He's actually I kind of expect him to be like a fourth round value guy. He's putting
Mhm.
up like second, like almost mid to early second round value right now.
You drafted him in our league, and I related him to when you picked Devin Booker in our league last
Hmm.
year that you and I did. I was like, it's overvalued, but at the same time, it makes sense because he's kind of their only offensive guy. And then another guy too on the Bulls, Larry Markkinen, he was a horrible bust last year.
Last
Like
season,
he
yeah.
was droppable bust
Hmm.
level,
Yeah.
and he's doing well. I mean, he's doing the production that you actually want him to have.
Yeah, I mean, in the games he's played, he hasn't played in over a week now because of he's
The health and safety
yeah,
protocol.
exactly. But when he played, yeah, he does some good games. He also had some clunkers, so he's been kind of inconsistent marking it in.
Mm-hmm.
But um, yeah, a little bit better than last year, at least so far.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I have a okay bust. Let's see. So in terms of bust, I have a few.
Okay.
Both of the Kings centers.
Okay. Okay.
So so especially Hassan Whiteside.
Oh
We
yeah.
knew last year he honestly I still don't get why it would make sense for Sacramento or for Hassan Whiteside to go there for two
Hmm.
million bucks, because it's not like he was going to get any time
Yeah.
with Holmes, and Holmes was producing at a ridiculous clip last year, pretty much
Hmm.
first round value, I think, by the end of the year. But I was like, this doesn't make any sense. And Whiteside's not that great of a player. It's just
Yeah.
what it is. But he was rebounding like crazy. And now like both of their values to me, now obviously Holmes is starting to look better with Whiteside getting DNP'd. I just need Whiteside to get traded so I can have
Yeah.
full confidence in what they're doing there in Sacramento. Like honestly, Sacramento has been bad this year because honestly Luke Walton sucks as a coach. I tried to avoid Sacramento Kings players, even
Yeah.
De'Aaron Fox, who I love, but I avoided him this year, even though
Hmm.
I was trying to get him back from you. But like I avoided him this year because I was like, I just hate how Luke Walton coaches this team, not only
Yeah.
in real life
Yeah.
but for fantasy value. It's brutal.
No, I mean that's definitely a fair point. I mean, I was a big believer in De'Aaron this year, just because I thought he would ball out after the contract they gave him. I
Mm-hmm.
thought they gave him the contract in the offseason. I thought he would ball out this year to kind of merit the contract. So I still am a big De'Aaron Fox believer. But I agree with you that outside of De'Aaron Fox, I don't like them for fantasy very much. I don't like Buddy Hield.
He only gives you threes. If you need threes,
Exactly.
get them. If you don't, whatever.
Exactly. Like that, and there's no one else really on that team. Like Bagley's been a drop.
Bagley's been a bust, is what he's
Yeah.
been. Like legit, he's on the bust territory. He should not have
Hmm.
been this bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Yeah, well, he's been a bust, like fantasy busted, but he's actually been a real life bust so far. He was
Bust.
a second overall pick. Yeah, second
Yeah.
overall.
He
So
needs to
yeah,
get traded too, but I don't know if they're gonna move him.
yeah, I don't know.
He needs a change of scenery.
Yeah, I don't know other fantasy busts. I'm trying to think.
Well,
Is that
can I say a bust team?
sure?
Atlanta Hawks.
I know you don't like Atlanta.
Like Atlanta, okay, Trae Young like hasn't even produced at a like he's been great, but he's
Hmm.
not necessarily producing at the fantasy level, particularly from the 3-point line that you would want.
Yeah.
Gallo has actually surprisingly been a drop.
Well, just because Gallo hasn't played, he played like 2 games and then got injured, and even the
Right.
2 games he played, he was okay in. So
Yeah.
that's the only thing. I think for Atlanta we still have to wait until they're fully healthy and see them play a little bit before we know kind of
We
how.
needed that now. We didn't need that halfway through the fantasy year. We
Yeah,
just
that's
didn't need this.
that's true. But I mean, they could get healthy soon. Like Gallo could come back soon. Um, but the problem is that now they have Bogdanovich out too. So it's not really like you're going to be seeing the full team and how they're
Yeah.
performing.
Like what do you do with Hunter and all those young guys there? Even
Yeah.
John Collins, that's not meshing very well right now. So
Hmm.
it's a mess.
Yeah.
Is there one other specific one for you? Is that kind of the
Oh,
main ones?
there's another one that's interesting is Drew Holiday. Drew Holiday's been kind of.
He had a nice stat line today, and I think his best fantasy game
Yeah, definitely
today. But other
he
than
had his
that,
best game today, but if you look at his other stat lines, he's still giving you that like elite assists, not assists, that elite steals production. And
mhm,
that's his calling card. That's Juice Holiday's calling card
mhm,
is those steals. But besides that, his rebounds and assists are still okay. Slight hits from last year, but
as
still okay.
expected though. I thought
Yeah,
we
as expected. But then his points have taken a bigger hit than I expected. I did not expect him to take this big of a hit in his scoring. Obviously, it was expected to some degree, playing with Giannis and Middleton, but I didn't expect him to take this much of a hit in his scoring. So
mhm,
that's been a little bit disappointing, but I don't think it's a massive disappointment only because he's been so good for steals that I think it makes up for it a bit.
mhm.
But it is a little bit. I think when you drafted Drew Holiday, you draft him as kind of like a cornerstone roster piece, and he's kind of just been a nice piece who gets a lot of steals. He hasn't been kind of that cornerstone guy that you drafted him
Mhm.
to be.
Yeah. And I guess a couple surprises. LaMelo Ball's been a surprise. He had a
Yeah.
pretty bad stat line today,
Yeah.
but he kind of reminds me a lot of Lonzo from a fantasy perspective because you
Hmm.
draft him expecting assists,
Hmm.
and we're sort of seeing that. Now, you had your concerns about the Hornets roster. Talk about some of your concerns with that complete roster from a fantasy perspective because it is a strange roster from that
Yeah,
perspective.
it definitely is a strange roster. So, they have a lot of guards, right? So they have Devontae Graham, they have Terry
Rozier,
Rozier, they have LaMelo Ball. So right there, those are three. Terry Rozier's I guess kind of a shooting guard,
he's been
but
a surprise this year. He's actually producing in a nice clip
yeah,
for what he's doing.
he is. Gordon Hayward, actually, let's talk about Gordon Hayward. Has actually been producing really well as
Yeah.
well.
He's
Gordon.
he's he's actually hit his value. Like the expected value of him
Mhm.
not being in Boston with all those other guys there, Jalen Brown, Jason Tatum.
Yeah.
The going to Charlotte was fantastic for his fantasy value because he hit his mark.
Well, yeah, because he's actually like he's the guy there. Obviously, in Boston, he wasn't the guy, but now in Charlotte, he is, and he's kind of looked kind of like his Utah form. To be honest, he's looked good. Maybe not quite the player he was in Utah,
No,
but
not with the injury that he had
but
in
like
Boston. No way.
he's kind of in that he's approaching that kind of level. He's close. He's playing at almost an all-star level right now.
He could make an all-star team.
He
And
could.
yeah, for
He
sure,
could.
for sure.
He could. Yeah.
So, and then of course we talked about PJ Washington last week. I think,
Yeah. Yeah. We
like
talked.
you've concerned, like he's definitely bounced back, but like the overall base of the roster, as you said. So go ahead and sort of
So
continue with that.
they have all those guards like I mentioned.
Bridges,
Then they also have Bridges. They have Hayward like we mentioned, and then they have
Washington,
Washington, and then they don't really have many bigs. They were starting Cody Zeller to start the year, but he got injured.
Bismack,
Yeah, so now
Busy.
they're starting Bismack Biombo, but really they're actually playing pretty small. So and that's interesting because they're kind of playing a lineup where they're playing three guards. So they're playing Graham, Rozier, and Ball, along
That's kind
with
of disgusting.
yeah, and then they're playing Washington and Hayward. So yeah, Hayward and Washington. Um, it's interesting. I think what they need to do eventually is I think they need to bring Devontae off the bench. I think they need to move him to the bench.
He
Uh,
should be. Again, he'd be much better for a fantasy perspective because all he's really doing is assists.
yeah, exactly. So I think what needs to happen is they need to move LaMelo Ball into the starting lineup, and then Graham come off the bench, and I think that would be pretty interesting. So and then you start Hayward at the three, and then it's interesting what you do after that. You start Washington you start at the four, and then I guess you start Cody Zeller when he gets back.
Yikes. They really needed center help and they didn't get it.
Yeah, because I think their idea was that they want to play kind of small because I've seen their coach Borrega. He's talked a lot about how he likes playing with pace, how he likes playing small, all these things. And he's talked a lot about PJ Washington playing center for him, which that's interesting. But do you
It'd
know
be
how tall?
nice for fantasy
Yeah,
value.
but do you know how tall PJ Washington is?
What is he like 6'9" or something?
He's
6'10"?
6'6".
Oh, that's too small.
Yeah, exactly.
That's way too small. Oh my god.
I think he may be 6'7" tops. Like I
Yeah.
definitely don't think he's taller than
Oh my god. What?
yeah.
Dang.
Yeah, let me see this. PJ Washington. There's just
Paul
six.
Washington Jr. as it's called
Yep,
on Josh Lloyd's fantasy podcast.
6'7". Yep, 6'7".
Ew, oh my god.
Yeah,
So
I told
so
you.
so this is the interesting thing about their head coach in Borje. Like this is what we saw last year with Charlotte, where it's like it's all about pace. This team is so young,
Mhm.
we're gonna just go, go, go. And
Yeah,
they
yeah.
were fun to watch in real life too because of that pace. So I guess
Mhm.
it makes sense, but it also kind of says like, all right, yeah, we're not gonna be competitive. We're just gonna be fast and shoot and get assists.
Yeah,
So I get
they honestly have not played that terribly, but they couldn't contend. They've been. I don't think they're a terrible team. I think they're kind of a middle of the pack Eastern Conference team who
they're what
could
they were last year. They're just fun. They're just fun
exactly.
to put on league pass. And then
Yeah, exactly. But I think they could maybe make a push at like an end, like an 8 seed, like an
yeah,
end of
like a qualifier seed
yeah,
or
yeah,
whatever. Yeah.
exactly. Like one of those end spots. I think they could make a run because I don't think they're bad. They're just not built to contend like seriously. But they are,
Mhm.
like you mentioned, they play fast, they play exciting. Um, so I mean, I do think they have talent. So there is some merit to them.
Mhm.
They're not bad. It's
Mhm.
just that I don't think they have a team built to really contend. They don't have a team that can really make some kind of a dent.
And then to another rookie, James Wiseman, his fantasy production
Hmm.
way above his ADP. He's gonna finish. What was his ADP? 106.
Something around there. Yeah.
He's gonna finish way higher than that. He's blown the roof off.
Yeah, yeah. It has been interesting with him because he's not really getting the minutes. If you look at his minutes, they're not very high. Like Steve Kerr's barely playing him 20 minutes a game. Not even, right?
Mhm.
But if you look at his production in those limited minutes, it's actually been pretty incredible.
Mhm.
So I think if they even start to give him a little bit more run later in the season, he could be even better, honestly.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
they're not fully unleashing him. Like if we see how many minutes a game he's playing, I think he's definitely like somewhere around like the 20-minute like mark, somewhere around there,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, I would imagine so.
So
Yeah.
I think if they like fully unleash him and actually,
Play him like
a-
30.
yeah, like he could actually put up some serious stat lines.
Mhm.
So like right now, I'm seeing it right now. He's averaging 20.6 minutes a game. It's almost exactly 20 minutes a game.
That's crazy.
So if they up him to if he gets somewhere close to, he doesn't have to get 30, but if they up him to,
27,
yeah, if they have him
26.
something like at least 25, approaching like mid 20s, he could have some serious value.
Mhm. And then maybe fantasy MVP front runner, a guy that I didn't believe in because he started last year terribly. Nikola Jokic. Are you
Yeah,
kidding me?
yeah. He's been incredible. Jokic so far. So
Should
I
he
think
have been the number one overall pick? Like, dang, maybe, or at least top four. Like, I mean, I took I was not like he was ranked number 2 ADP on
Mhm.
ESPN, and I'm starting to wonder if that was accurate because I thought that was silly.
Yeah, I think so. I think with Jokic, kind of like his main fantasy crutch has always been his scoring. He's always been that guy who he's gonna rebound for you. He's gonna give you amazing assists out of the center spot too, which is what makes him so valuable is the fact that he's giving you all these assists out of the center spot, right?
Hmm.
But his stocks have never been incredible. His points aren't incredible. So I think that's kind of what has always weighed Jokic down.
Hmm.
But this year he had, like you said, he hasn't gone off that slow start he always gets to.
Yeah.
He's just come out of the gate just so much faster, and I think part of that just has to do with so what he always does, what has always been the case, he always kind of comes into the season a little out of shape. That's just I
Yeah.
don't know.
He was
I don't
in shape in the bubble. Like, god dang.
Exactly. And he actually is now too. If you look at him now, he's actually kind of the same. He hasn't put on weight again. So
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing for him is um, he just wasn't in game shape last year, and it took him a long time to work into it. It took him about a month, and then he was fine. And the same thing happened 2 seasons ago too. This has happened with Jokic for the past, I think, 2 or 3 seasons. He gets off to his like yearly slow start. He's for like for the first month of the season, he's kind of brutal, and then he like is a first round value the rest of the season, right?
Yeah.
This year he's just not doing that. I think that's what's surprising people the most is just that he's not having that early slump like he's
Hmm.
like he's done in the past.
A couple more guys that I've thought about fantasy wise that I do want to get your opinion on. Another Denver guy, Jamal Murray. He's kind of been inconsistent.
Yeah,
And I
Jamal.
expected him to be inconsistent. I wasn't
Yeah,
expecting bubble Murray. Like a lot of
yeah.
the ADPs were bubble Murray, and I was like,
Hmm.
there's no way that that's a valuable ADP at all.
Yeah,
And
I know.
I think proved to be right so far this year.
I completely agree with you. So I've never been the biggest Jamal Murray fan for fantasy.
Hmm.
Like last year he was okay, but I've never been the biggest fan of his for fantasy. And
Hmm.
so I think what happened with him is like you said, so he had that amazing bubble run, especially in the playoffs, he was incredible, right?
Hmm.
And I think everyone saw that, and that caused his ADP to just balloon the way it did.
What was his ADP? 26, 25?
I don't know exactly. I don't know if it was that high.
It might have been like 34 or
It may have
something
been
like that.
it may have been in the 30s, but I still think it's higher than he deserved.
Yeah.
So um, I don't know. I kind of expected that with Jamal Murray. I think if you expected Murray to be, bubble Murray, then I think he's a disappointment. But if
Were
you,
we expecting that really? Like, if you drafted him, you weren't expecting that. I mean, are you
I
kidding
don't know.
me?
I wasn't, but I
I
don't know
wasn't
if
at all.
some people may have. I don't know.
Yeah. ADP, so of course, average draft position. That's like, talk about actually why ADP is important because this is something I've tried to emphasize, not only for fantasy basketball, but for fantasy football as well. Why is ADP so valuable?
I mean, it's valuable just because it's an interesting metric to use to compare. So, like when you draft a player, you draft them, fantasy in general is all speculation. We're all just speculating on what we think players will do and
We're
things like
trying to
that.
get breakout guys to win our
Yeah,
league and stuff like
exactly.
that.
We're kind of just guessing we're just guessing like who's gonna play well and who's not, right?
Hmm.
So when we're drafting players, obviously it's all speculation from us and the experts as well. All the experts, they're all just speculating, just like us too. So when there's ADP, that's just kind of the average place people are taking players. It's kind of what most people are speculating them to go. But
Yeah.
a lot of players, they either overperform their ADP or they underperform. And I think it's just important because if you get a guy who's much more valuable than his ADP, that's how you win fantasy leagues. Like
Yeah.
you take guys who outperform their ADPs, and that's how you win. You win by that, and that's kind of why it's so important because
Yeah.
it's just you gain those high value guys for low prices is essentially the idea.
Right. Right. And then I don't know if you had a specific player that you wanted to discuss that we didn't get to, but Luca's also gotten to a bit of a rough start fantasy wise. What do you
Yeah.
make of that? Because
So
I had him ADP ranked 1 this year. He was my
mhm.
number 1 ranked player going into the year.
So I think Luca had a bad start. He kind of had the Jokic effect in that I think Luca came a little bit out of shape. People talked about that a bit. He was looking a bit overweight. He didn't look like he was in game shape. And I think that affected him like about the first week or two of the season. But if you look at Luka's recent games, they've been incredible. Look at his
Yeah.
last like
He's definitely been better of late for sure.
his last 3-4 games. He's been amazing.
Yeah.
His game today was incredible if you look at what he put up today.
Yeah.
So I think I think he had a slow start just because he was trying to work his way back into game shape. He hadn't played in however many months really. So I think it was just kind of trying to get back into it. I think that was mostly it, but I think now he's fine. So I
Yeah.
think that's mostly what it was.
Yeah. Is there any other specific players that you wanted to highlight that you think have been good or been bad? Is there anything that you specifically noticed? Because I've noticed a lot of these particular players, but is there any player that you've noticed before we head
Uh,
off?
I think we mentioned a lot of the ones. I'm trying to think off the top of my head, but we definitely mentioned a lot of them.
Like the core ones that everyone's sort of
Yeah,
thinking about.
exactly. Yeah, I don't know if there's any other crazy one. I mean, KD has been amazing.
Oh,
So
he's not been what we expected because we were worried about the Achilles thing. I know he
yeah,
was on my do not draft list this year. Curry was on mine too. He went number 4 in our draft.
hmm
I think that's a fair value for him because he's going to be an MVP candidate because he's kind of the only guy there.
yeah.
Oh, actually, speaking on the Warriors too, Wiggins and Oubre, it's been up and down. What has been your perspective on those guys? Because that's another two
It
that I've been.
it has been up and down. Definitely Ubre. Ubre has definitely been a low point. He's been shooting terribly.
Mhm,
He kind of woke up a little bit yesterday. Yesterday was like his first good game in a while.
mhm.
Um, but he has been up and down, mostly down.
Even for his ADP, which wasn't even that high.
Oh yeah, he's actually been pretty brutal for his ADP.
Yeah.
I think his ADP was actually, I think it was too high. I think he was drafted too highly, and I
Mhm.
think he's
On ESPN, he
underperforming
was
pretty
ranked
badly.
like 89, but I think we drafted him around like 60 or 70, like or whatever. I remember Wiggins was like at 80 some, and I picked him at like 60.
Oh no, Wiggins, yeah, but Ubre's ADP was much higher. Ubre's ADP was like
Like
somewhere like in the
50.
50s. Yeah, it was like in the
Yeah,
50s. Yeah.
yeah.
And so Uber has been a disappointment. Wiggins has actually been pretty okay. I don't think Wiggins has been too bad,
He had a
but
crazy game yesterday.
mhm. I'm just not the biggest Wiggins fan. I don't know. I just don't see him as a very valuable fantasy player.
I mean, my whole thing with Wiggins is like how I feel like one thing I did bad in my draft was like messing up on categorical scarcity, like threes
hmm
and stuff like that. So like I did a bad job on that. Um, but like for me with Wiggins, it was like the small forwards in general,
Oh yeah.
as with the point guards, are like really brutal. There were
hmm
like as I started mock drafting this year, I was like surprised by how brutal it is.
No, yeah, I agree with
Especially,
that.
I didn't even rank Paul George that high either, so that kind of screwed me too. Because
No,
he's surprised me too this year.
yeah, that's true. I agree with you that the small forward depth is definitely it's pretty shallow.
Mhm.
So I think for that reason, I do think Wiggins is valuable just because he's kind of a low ADP target that's pretty solid for his ADP. So I think if like again the drafts are over, we drafted about a month ago at this point.
Yeah,
So it's been about a while. But if you were drafting and you didn't take a small forward at like that Wiggins placement, there was really no one after him.
you're done.
Like you were pretty much stuck with like
Otto
Mikal Bridges.
Porter.
Yeah, Otto Porter, Mikal Bridges, like those kind of
Mikel's
guys.
overperformed his ADP so far this or
Yeah,
yeah.
Mikal's been pretty good, but I'm just saying like that's the kind of small forward you got stuck with. If you like after Wiggins, there really wasn't that much in terms of small forward.
Yeah. Yeah, and then threes have been hard for me to find. Shea's been interesting because he's also I think the hype kind of got to me and so many of us in the
hmm
fantasy community. Like but I feel like he's not at his peak yet. I think by mid-season, he's gonna
Yeah,
start shooting threes a little bit better. Like he's not where he is completely. Plus, this is kind of his first season as the vocal point, so you
yeah,
expect some growing pains there.
yeah. That's true. I think that's fair. I think Shea has not been what everyone expected to this point, but I agree with you that I think he can still get better as the season goes on. Yeah.
I've been the one mentioning all these players. These are the things that I constantly think about as a fantasy player. I just like constantly think about all of this stuff.
I just
Players that
I
are not
don't
on my team.
I that's true. Yeah, I'm trying to think of players that I have off the top of my head, but I honestly think you mentioned a lot of them.
Yeah, like is there anyone on your teams that you've kind of like been happy with or unhappy with that we haven't talked about other than Levine? I think that's pretty much it, but
Yeah, Levine, everyone else kind of been relatively consistent, kind of what I expected. Um,
mhm.
so yeah, I don't know.
I
Any really surprising fantasy players? I don't.
I
That,
think I mentioned all of them pretty much because those were
yeah,
like all the main ones that I've been thinking
yeah,
about.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I can't think of any more off the top of my head, but yeah, that
Yeah.
was a pretty good list. There have been some surprises, but I think in terms of kind of baseline production, the season's been more or less what we expected. I think what's really kind of thrown the season off has been the whole, COVID health and safety protocols things.
Yeah, my team has been rough. Like injuries have been a bigger problem. It's not only like COVID's been what it is and it's been brutal, but more so just like the general injuries. Like do you see I posted like what the Lakers have done too?
Oh
Like they've
yeah,
done
yeah,
this
yeah.
the past few years with LeBron and AD, but it's the injury just in general has seemed to be going up just because they're starting so quickly and
Yeah, yeah.
it
You
adds to it. It's been a brutal start to the year for injuries, and it kind of came to a head this week, pretty
Yeah,
much.
I think that's been the biggest kind of wrench in this season has just been the injuries.
Hmm.
That's kind of thrown it off. But in terms of like statistical production, I don't think there've been many, huge surprises. I think
Hmm.
that it's been kind of more or less what people expected,
Yeah,
for the most part. Um, but yeah,
there, yeah, yeah.
it's been an interesting season so far, for sure.
And especially like how we expanded the rosters for me. Like we've expanded in a way where I like now I wish we had like 4 IR spots because so many guys are injured. But we like in your league you had 4 bench, we had 5 in our league.
Yeah,
Like that's been actually super helpful for everybody. It's made the waiver wire pretty dead, but you can kind of figure it out. But
yeah,
the waiver wire isn't like there's not like a consistent core guy normally in the
yeah,
waiver wire.
yeah.
Even at this point in the season, you're not going to find that.
It's not what it's been in previous years, but I mean, it's okay. I think I agree that the bigger roster sizes have, they've contributed to that, but they've also helped rosters in general. So I think it's okay. It's kind of just a trade-off.
Yeah,
It's
things that
the
leagues are more competitive. Basically, teams are more competitive
mhm,
overall.
yeah.
What do you prefer, the 3 bench or the 5 bench? Because I still very much prefer the 3 bench and
Yeah,
like two IR.
I think I also like the three bench. I think so. Yeah, yeah.
It adds more to the waiver wire.
Mhm,
You don't have to stream. Like I feel like streaming has actually died down this year
mhm,
because like a guy like Maxi, who's a nice streamer, actually has like back to backs. There's more back to backs for streamers, but you don't have to stream as aggressively as years past. But
yeah.
even then, like in my other leagues where we have 3, I'm not streaming as much because
Mhm,
you can draft a more if you know what you're doing, you can draft a better baseline with 3 than with 5 because your
yeah.
issues become more apparent with 5. So you have to
Mhm,
like fill your 3 and 4 guys with your issues, or excuse me, like your 4 and 5 guys with your issues. Then in a 3 bench league where your issues have to be variant in some ways to not worry about it as much.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
still prefer the three man bench
mhm.
though. I don't know. It's just the 5 man bench isn't bad, but I like just the smaller benches with more streaming. It's just I don't know. It's just a personal preference for
Mhm.
me.
How do you approach streaming too? Because I think it's still hard for me to approach it some weeks. It really depends on my team. Does
It
it
just
depend on your team too?
somewhat. It just depends on for me. If I'm streaming and if I actually have a slot that I can stream in, kind of what I do is I just kind of my general approach is just to maximize number of players. That's just
Maximize number of games. That's what it is
exactly
basically.
maximum number of games. And so that's the first step to my approach. So, early part of the week when I'm streaming is I'm just kind of getting who can I add to my roster to add another game or two, and
Hmm.
who's going to give me good production. I just need I'm not targeting categories at that point. I'm just kind of targeting games and good production, right?
Depending on how you feel about your categories, like some that you know are bad and you know it can
Yeah,
be filled,
yeah,
then
yeah.
maybe you can
And
do that.
depending on your opponent, it could depend on your opponent as well. So
Right,
that can
of
also be
course.
a thing. So that's kind of my early week streaming approach. But what happens later in the week? What I do is I started kind of targeting categories. So I started looking based on my team, who I have left playing the rest of the week, and who my opponent has playing the rest of the week. I kind of started trying to see, what are his strong categories, what are his weak ones, what are my strong ones, what are my weak ones, and with the players I have left remaining and that he has, like, how do I think this is going to shake out? Like, do I think like these categories are secure and it's pretty much
Some you
over?
just blow them out the water, and you're like, God dang.
Exactly. So that's exactly by like Thursday or Friday. Sometimes you'll know that, oh, this category is set just
I'm
based
gonna
on
win.
like exactly just based on like how we're standing now and based on who I have left remaining like the next couple days or whatever. You'll be like, okay, yeah, I won this category, right? And in that case, I don't worry about that category anymore. And so in my streaming, I'm targeting those kind of like swing categories. I'm targeting the categories that will be close that I could win, right? So I'm not worrying about categories that I've for sure won or for sure lost at that point.
This is kind of a good crash course for those of you who have kind of or trying to sort of understand fantasy basketball. So streaming, of course, is like picking up a player every day, dropping them, pick someone else up. In terms of punting, this is something that I was trying to tell sort of everyone in our group who's kind of new to fantasy basketball. Punting is like you kind of ignore a category. And I've had
Yeah.
difficulty punting this year because I'm someone who punts free throws and field goals a lot because they're just
Mm-hmm.
kind of very variable.
Yeah.
And then this year, I'm kind of forcing myself to punt threes, even though it's a bit brutal,
Mm-hmm.
especially when I'm trying to sort of figure out stocks and stuff. But punting basically means you ignore a category. People say to approach it during your draft. I don't do that. I approach it after. I think you do as well.
Sure.
But like, how does punting kind of play an effect for you when you sort of as you go through the season when you're constructing your team?
So I agree with you that I don't do it in the draft.
A lot of
Just
people do, and I don't prefer it. I just draft who I
yeah,
want,
exactly.
basically.
I don't when I'm drafting, I draft who I want and who I think is um usually like the best available player for my roster construction, right?
And my needs, yeah.
And yeah, I'm not necessarily worrying about punting categories, right? I'm trying to make them the most well balanced team I can, and then from there I'll figure it out, right? From there, as the season goes on, then I kind of figure out what are my strong categories, what are my weak categories, and then I can figure out my punts. Because I think if you try to punt in the draft, I think because it's again, as I mentioned earlier, it's all speculation. So you're kind of just speculating what these players' stats are going to look like before they've even played, and you're punting based on that. Like you're giving up on a stat without even seeing these players play.
Right, like a
Right?
guy like Julius Randle, if you're punting assist, for example, and you said I
Yeah.
was going to punt assist, look at his assist production. You shouldn't
Yeah.
be punting assist.
Exactly. So
Something like that.
you haven't seen these players play. So you're speculating that they're gonna be good in these categories and bad in these categories, but you haven't seen it. So that's why I agree with you that I kind of, if I'm going to punt, I kind of let that play out as the season goes. Kind of as the season's going, I see, oh, maybe I'm a weak, like you said, you're like a weak threes team, right?
My team is severely weak on threes, but it's also
Yeah.
just hard to find.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff that you end up punting, like threes or even sometimes stocks, but stocks are a little easier depending on your roster. You
Hmm.
know, field goals on free throws. I don't know what your perspective is on it, but that one is always hard to gauge because it changes week to week so dramatically. Like for me, like with punting, like I try to punt three categories, but I am kind of a nebbly punting four in most weeks, which is kind of brutal.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm still trying to sort of figure out my threes production currently because I think I
Hmm.
can figure it out as the season goes along. But like for you with punting, like I usually just punt free throws and field goals. What are your perspective on those categories? Because I think those are the toughest for me to gauge.
For free goal, field goal, and free throw,
Yeah, in
I think
terms of the
those.
percentage.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with you that they are very variable. So I don't hate punting those just because of the variability in those. I think, especially field goal, I think it's usually a pretty good category to punt.
Especially if you have a guy like Giannis, like I do, or Drummond,
Yeah, yeah,
you're
that's
gonna
for free
punt
for
it.
free throws. Yeah, um, it's yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. It's I don't know. It's variable. So I think if any punting, like I said, just kind of see how it goes. And I don't think you need to make a determination that you're punting a category like at the draft. I think just see how it plays out. And it can always change. So like I've had teams where I thought I was punting a category and then I realized like, oh, like I'm actually a lot better in this category than I thought. So
Mhm.
um I think that I don't think you should be too quick to punt a category is what I think.
It will basically, your punting is going to evolve. This is something people don't talk about in fantasy circles. Like, punting is going to evolve just as the rest of your team evolves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Exactly. Punting evolved because I think it changes. Like you said, it's not just constant through the whole year potentially.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think, it's interesting with field goals and free throws because you can really, I find that in fantasy, you really split those categories most weeks.
Yeah.
Most weeks you'll split it. So, like,
That's
even
true.
if you're punting it, you're still going to split it.
That's true.
So,
That's true. That's true.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on, Paul. This was much longer than we expected, but we kind of,
Yeah.
as we always do, we get into these really deep fantasy conversations.
Yeah. That tends to be the case.
But thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. It was fun. We'll definitely have you and David on with Brandon and Shane and the whole group, and Brandon and Shane will give their thoughts about the trade. I think we're recording on Sunday next, so expect that to come out on Monday. I think this will come out later tonight or tomorrow morning. But yeah, thanks for coming on. It's good to have these conversations. It's really fun. So thanks for coming on.
Appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, and we will see you all on Sunday. Have